want to talk about this synth sequencer, which is Toraiz AS-1, a collaboration between Pioneer and Dave Smith Instruments. This is a mono synth built using the same architecture as the Prophet 6. But don't believe me, you can look it up and hear Dave Smith talking about it. And also, if you connect a Prophet 6 to a Toraiz, you can control every single parameter using the front panel of the Prophet just as it is. One of the parts that I really like about the synthesizer, it's its sequencer. It has some crippling bugs, which I will make another video of, but right now I want to show some of the good stuff of the sequencer. You can use it through MIDI, you can use it through the analog trigger input, you can go both ways through USB with your DAW, or you can control and program with its own standalone software. But I'm not gonna talk about that in this video. The sequencer is a step sequencer type. It has a maximum of 64 notes, which you can play once recorded at different resolutions. Right now we're gonna listen to some presets. Each preset has its own sequence. You can program your own sequence or scroll through the presets, and if you like one, you can lock it, and then you can scroll through the presets playing that same sequence. So right now we're gonna lock the sequence so we can keep it running while we switch sounds. I'm gonna reset a program. For this we press latch and hold, and it goes back to the basic program, which is a single saw waveform with no envelopes or filter applied. When you reset, it also applies to the sequence, which goes back to a simple sequence. To input a sequence, there's no actual way of real-time playing. You need to input step by step. There are a maximum of 64 steps. So if I push the rec button, then enter a note, that will be one step recorded. And I can press all the notes all the way up to 64. If I press the ARP button, that will enter a silence. If I press the hold button, it will tie the note with the previous one. I'm gonna record 4 notes. If I press play, it will play the sequence in a loop. So I'm gonna press rec. Then for the first step, I'm gonna input a note. For the second step, I'm gonna insert a silence. And for 3 and 4, I'm gonna put it an octave up. So this will sound roughly like an 80s bass line. I'm gonna transpose. And then you can transpose in real time. a longer sequence. I think about 32 steps. So there's the sequence. I'm gonna transpose down. Once recorded, you can change the resolution or time that it's playing. Proceed to modify the sound. So right now we have a sequence, and I tailored a sound specifically for this sequence. I'm gonna keep this sequence, which is very basic, and I'm gonna keep the same sound, which is also very basic, because I wanna move on to the trigger input feature, which is an amazing tool for syncing and just for letting creativity roll. The way that I came up to use the trigger input on the back of the Toraiz is because I acquired this TR-606 recently, and since 80% of my studio it's MIDI controlled, I was not able to sync this machine to any other gear, so I started looking ways that I could input in my gear and stuff. So I found this trigger outputs, and I found this trigger input, and well, the TR-606 has 7 channels: accent, bass drum, snare, low tom, high tom, cymbal, open hat, and close hat. Whatever you program in low tom or high tom goes out the trigger outputs. So right now I'm using the high tom channel to go into the Toraiz. Each trigger signal from the TR-606 goes into the Toraiz, and each individual signal triggers a note of my sequence. In this case, I programmed 32 notes. So if I program 16 steps, it will take 2 bars to finish my recorded sequence at the Toraiz. But if I program just 1 per bar, it will take 32 bars to go through all the sequence. So let's try that. I'm gonna plug in the trigger. Then I go into the menu and configure to receive trigger. Then on this side, I will plug to the high tom output. So anything that I program into the high tom will go out through a trigger output. In this case, I pre-program all the 16 notes so we can hear exactly the same sequence that we heard before. This is where the fun starts. Since it's synchronized now, I can start programming the drum machine independently and start programming the sounds independently and play with them. Since the trigger input receives audio, these are really short clicks. You can put a hi-hat or just a stick hitting. You can send that in and that will trigger your sequence. So then I started thinking about things that I could sync that are not really syncable by sending a constant click to the sequencer. So following that logic, I used a TR-606 to record a rhythm into a tape. I recorded the trigger into channel 1 and the beat into channel 2. Just to use it as a mixer, I put in channel 4 the audio from the Toraiz, and at channel 3 it's just something that was at the tape before. But since it's on the other side of the tape, it's reversed, I'm gonna use that. So I'm sending channel 1 through the auxiliary output of the PortaStudio into the Toraiz to send the click, and that click will trigger each note of the sequencer. So I'm gonna use the same sequence and the same sound, and I'm gonna start the sequence, but I'm gonna lower the drum machine sound, then I'm gonna slowly fade in.
Så I'm off the data value door that
well, those are 2 ideas to trigger the Toraiz sequencer using the trigger input. Thank you for staying this long. I plan to make a series on the Toraiz and some other gear, synthesizers, effects, and samplers that I have, all hardware. Please be safe and enjoy what you're doing with your life.
Snitched in this, I'm off the data valid door.